announcement. The explosion had caused massive damage to the Providence industrial zone and surrounding areas on the main island of Mahe, the statement said, while flooding due to the rains had resulted in major destruction. The statement gave no further details. The Seychelles is made up of 115 islands and is the least populous country in Africa with about 100,000 people. The search has ended for any more victims among climbers who were caught by a weekend eruption of Indonesia's Mount Merapi volcano that killed 23 people and injured several others, officials said Thursday. About 75 climbers started up the nearly 2,900-meter mountain in Agam district of West Sumatra province on Saturday and were on the volcano when it was erupted the following day. West Sumatra Police Chief Suharyono said earlier that the discovery of the body of a female university student Wednesday had raised the confirmed death toll to 23. Officials said Thursday that they believed all dead had been recovered. After an evaluation of the search Wednesday, said Abdul Mohari, the National Disaster Mitigation Agency spokesperson. The National Search and Rescue Agency said all the bodies had been taken to a hospital by late Wednesday in responding to attacks by Yemen, Houthis against ships in the Red Sea, two sources familiar with Saudi thinking said, as Riyadh seeks to contain spillover from the Hamas-Israel war. The Iran-aligned Houthis have waded into the conflict that has spread around the Middle East since war erupted on October 7, attacking vessels in vital shipping lanes and firing drones and missiles at Israel itself. The group, which rules much of Yemen, says its attacks are a show of support for the Palestinians and has vowed they will continue until Israel stops its offensive on the Gaza Strip, more than 1,000 miles from their seat of power in Sana'a. The Houthis are one of several groups in the Iran-aligned Axis of Resistance, which have been attacking Israeli and U.S. targets since the start of the conflict on October 7, when the Palestinian ally Hamas sparked the war by attacking Israel. Their role has added to the conflict, regional risk, threatening sea lanes through which much of the world oil ships and warring states on the Red Sea as how these rockets and drones fly towards Israel. Riyadh, the world's top oil exporter, has watched the alarm as how these missiles have been fired over its territory. With the Houthis stepping up attacks on shipping over the past weeks, two sources familiar with Saudi's thinking said Riyadh's message of restraint to Washington aimed to avoid further escalation. Riyadh was so far pleased with the way the United States was handling the situation. The sources stopped, one of the sources said. The White House declined to comment. The Saudi government did not respond to an emailed request for comment on the discussions. Russian President Vladimir Putin has made a rare trip abroad to the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. Expected discussion topics included the wars in Gaza and Ukraine, as well as oil production with the UAE president. The UAE is currently hosting the COP28 UN Climate Summit. Mr. Putin, who has barely left Russia since March when the International Criminal Court issued him an arrest warrant, will also see Iran leaders on Thursday in Moscow. The ICC has accused him of illegally deporting Ukrainian children to Russia, a war crime, but neither the UAE nor Saudi Arabia recognize the court's jurisdiction. The Russian leader has snubbed other recent international summits, including BRICS in South Africa in August and the G20 summit in September in India. The trips come as Russia is keen to project influence and undermine the West's attempts to isolate it. Mr. Putin was greeted in the UAE with a full cavalry escort and motorcade, while a national aerial acrobatics team drew the Russian flag in the sky with smoke trails. Russia's leader told UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan that our relations have reached unprecedented levels. Trade and oil will be on the agenda in the UAE, which a Kremlin statement said is Russia's main economic partner in the Arab world. The Russian president later traveled to Saudi Arabia to meet the kingdom's de facto ruler, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. During a brief televised sit-down chat with Mr. Putin, invited the Crown Prince to visit Moscow. Nothing can prevent the development of our friendly relations, he said, adding that it was important to exchange information Prosecutors in Japan are seeking the death penalty for the suspect in an arson attack in 2019 that killed 36 people in one of the country's deadliest crimes for decades. Shinji Aoba, who was not arrested until he had recovered from the burns he sustained in the attack on an animation, underwent a psychiatric evaluation before standing trial, entered a plea of not guilty, claiming a psychological disorder had rendered him incapable of distinguishing between right and wrong. He faces 5 charges, including murder, attempted murder, and arson. The deaths of dozens of people at the Kyoto Animation Studio in July 2019 sent shockwaves through Japan and prompted an outpouring of grief among fans of the company's output. The shock was compounded by the ages of the victims, many of whom were young employees, including a 21-year-old woman. 32 of the studio's 70 employees and others in the building were injured. Aoba, 45, who is accused of breaking into the studio's building and setting light to gasoline he had poured on the ground floor, apologized for the first time on Wednesday. Quote, "I feel tremendously sorry and the feeling includes a sense of guilt," end quote, he told the court, according to public broadcaster NHK. Aoba, who reportedly yelled at his victims to die as he started the fire, alleged that the studio had plagiarized his work, a claim prosecutors described as delusional. The court is due to deliver its verdict on 25th January. Audiences in Japan will finally get to see Oppenheimer's Christopher Nolan's hit biopic about the creator of the nuclear bomb, following criticism that it was marketed in a way that trivialized the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The movie's distributor in Japan, Bitters End, said on Thursday that the film, which examines L. Robert Oppenheimer's moral quandary over his key role in the world's first nuclear attack on 6 August 1945, would be released in 2024. In a statement carried in Japanese media, the firm said it had taken the decision after lengthy discussions that took into account the backlash it had sparked in Japan after it went on international release at the same time as the comedy movie Barbie in July. The film's subject matter is of great importance and holds special meaning for Japanese people, so we decided to release it in Japan after various discussions and consideration. Killing an estimated 200,000 people. Singapore and China will put in place a 30-day mutual visa exemption agreement early next year, the Singapore Foreign Ministry said on Thursday. Both countries will work out the implementation details of the mutual 30-day visa exemption arrangement and implement it in the early 2024. The 30-day mutual visa exemption agreement between our two countries will also support such progress which can promote more personal exchanges and strengthen the cornerstone of bilateral relations. The paper quoted him as saying, "This year, China resumed 15-day visa-free entry for citizens of Singapore more than 3 years after such visas were suspended because of the COVID-19 pandemic. China has been eager for the agreement to become reciprocal, Reuters reported in May, citing Beijing Embassy, Singapore's central bank organizing migration, and Ankara questioning the ownership of outlying Greek islands. During Thursday's visit, expected to last barely 6 hours, the famously unpredictable leader will put pugilism aside." On the brink of joining NATO, Sweden has signed a deal across the Scandinavian country, saying the deal will create better conditions for Sweden to be able to receive support. It didn't mean that all 17 locations will be used, but where it is most important from a military perspective for them to be able to store defense equipment, for example. The deal was signed at the Pentagon by Johnson and U.S. Defense Secretary. Strategically important Baltic Sea island of Gotland sits a little more than 300 kilometers from the Russian Baltic Sea enclave of Kaliningrad. In negotiating such an agreement with NATO members Finland and Denmark and 2 other Nordic countries. Sweden and its neighbor Finland decided to drop their long-standing policy of non-alignment after Moscow's invasion was found dead on Wednesday near Moscow. The Ukrainian military intelligence lauded the killing, warning that other traitors of Ukraine would share the same fate. 2022 was found dead with a gunshot wound to the head in a cottage village near Moscow. Russia's State Investigative Committee opened a probe on murder charges. Andriy Yusov, a spokesman for Ukraine's military intelligence, said in a televised remarks that Kryvyi was done, adding that the same fate will befall other traitors will befall other traitors of Ukraine and accomplices of Putin's regime. Before going over to the Russian side, Kryvyi had fought against Moscow's backed separatist rebel in Ukraine's eastern region of Donetsk and was elected to parliament in 2019. Since his flight to Moscow, Kryvyi was a frequent participant in talk shows on Russian state television, during which he blasted the Ukrainian leadership. Last month, a court in Ukraine sentenced him to 14 years in prison on absentia of charges of treason. Kryvyi's killing follows a slew of other attacks on prominent war supporters in Russia. Work to prevent the collapse of a leaning medieval tower in the heart of the northern Italian city of Bologna will cost 20 million euros and take 20 million pounds and take 10 years at least, its mayor has said. Last week, the city unveiled a 4.3 million pound project to shore up the with the commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth II in 2019 for services to television and heritage, will replace Richard Sharp, who was forced to resign after his communication with former Prime Minister Boris Johnson came under scrutiny. Sharp will now be quizzed by cross-party MPs of the House of Commons Media Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee for pre-appointment scrutiny before formally taking charge of the public service broadcaster. Quote, with a career spanning more than 40 years in TV production and journalism, Dr. Shah has a wealth of experience to bring to the position of BBC chair, end quote. UK Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser said on Wednesday, confirming the selection as per the appointment process. Quote, he has a clear ambition to see the BBC succeed in a rapidly changing media landscape, and I have no doubt he will provide the support and scrutiny that the BBC needs to meet the challenges and opportunities of the future, end quote, she said. The minister said Shah's knowledge of the British Broadcasting Corporation and his belief in his role as a national broadcaster represents and serves communities across the whole of UK. Quote, the BBC is without doubt one of the greatest contributions we have made to global culture and one of our strongest calling cards and soft power, end quote, Shah said. Quote, if I am able to put what skills, experience and understanding of public service broadcasting I have built up during my career to help this brilliant organization meet the complex and diverse challenges it faces over the coming years, it will be an honor, end quote, he added. Quote, the BBC has agreed snow and freezing temperatures have already arrived, UN officials said Wednesday. Assistant Secretary General Miroslav Jenka told the UN Security Council risk to all four of Ukraine late Wednesday it was grounding all of its Osprey V-22 helicopters 1 week after 8 Air Force Special Operations Command service members died in a crash off the coast of Japan. The Air Force, Navy and Marine Corps took the extraordinary step of grounding hundreds of aircraft after a preliminary investigation of last week's crash indicated that a material failure, that something went wrong with the aircraft and not a mistake. All of us.